Hello, everybody. Welcome to this emergency episode of the College Football Insiders, coming to you, like less than an hour and a half, 2 hours from our regularly live show on Sundays, recapping Week 5. Arkansas has fired Arkansas coach Sam Pittman in the middle of his 6th season following a 56-13 historic loss to Notre Dame. And now they have installed Bobby Petrino as the interim head coach there for the Razorbacks, maybe shocking the world a little bit, but not so much if you've been listening to College Football Insiders for the last 2 weeks. We've been seeing this coming with Bobby Petrino, the coach who was disgraced and shamed and fired a little bit over a dozen years ago for having an affair with a subordinate and then lying about it in the middle of a motorcycle accident there at Arkansas, fired for cause, but he's rehabilitated his image. And now he's back at Arkansas as the offensive coordinator, and less than 2 years back on the job. He's now the interim head coach, and even told athletics director Hunter Yurachek that he wants to pursue and be considered a candidate for the full-time head coaching gig. I am joined by Chris Hummer here for this emergency episode of the College Football Insiders. First off, Chris, welcome. And what's your reaction today to all of this news?
Can't say I'm surprised. This is, as we've talked about the last couple of weeks, this is a job that industry sources have circled since the beginning of the season, and it only got more obvious over time, like what could result of this. Brandon, you've reported that the buyout didn't really make a difference, whether it was $9.7 million or dropped down to 5.9. I think this cycle, that's a drop in the bucket either way for some of these teams and some of the decisions they have to make. And Arkansas, if it was serious about its future, was going to make a decision either way based on what was happening in the now. And what was happening was an Arkansas team that was struggling a lot, a Arkansas team that looked listless on Saturday against Notre Dame. You were risking losing the fan base potentially. There were boo birds raining down on Sam Pittman. And ultimately, like you wrote a great column about this yesterday, Brandon. Sam Pittman did a lot for Arkansas. Sam Pittman helped right the ship from a very broken tenure that ended under Chad Morris, but he never figured out a way to push it over the line. He never really figured out a way to put Arkansas in any real contention in the SEC, and things were clearly going the wrong direction.
Yeah, Sam Pittman took over a program that was winless in the SEC under Chad Morris. In fact, Arkansas's losing streak in the SEC reached 20 games at one point, and then Pittman turned it around. And in his second season, they won 9 games in 2021, took them to a bowl game, and they beat Penn State in the Outback Bowl. And all of a sudden, the fan base was alive again. And then ever since then, they just haven't been able to meet that and have been on a kind of a downward trajectory since then. These last 2 seasons, as you've talked about in the past, Chris Hummer, they've had the most combined amount of players transfer out of the program in the SEC these last 2 years. So lack of consistency among the roster there, and you keep gambling on that, it's probably going to blow up in your face at some point. Not every year, but at some point. And it blew up in their face this season. You've seen it elsewhere across college football where that approach has worked, and then one year doesn't. Florida State comes to mind, for example. And the Razorbacks just had too many new pieces here. And people I've talked around there at Arkansas just said that the players just aren't gelling together very well, especially defensively. And that proves itself out when you watch them on film and watch them live in action. You guys saw against Notre Dame, that defense looks historically bad for the Razorbacks. And they've had some bad defenses, including previously in the Chad Morris era. Now the question is Bobby Petrino the coach that can galvanize the players and get them to play together and come together? I think that's possible, sure. I think more than anything, them elevating Bobby Petrino as the interim head coach galvanizes the fan base a little bit, because they love Bobby Petrino for the most part. Even though some of them are like, well, I don't know if we want him to be the permanent head coach, a lot of them are excited because of his no-nonsense approach, his creativity offensively, and then also just the nostalgia factor of, hey, this is the last coach and the only coach in the modern SEC era for Arkansas that led them to 11 wins, 11 victories in 2011. And then he did that and then got fired just a few months later in the offseason for cause. So fascinating. And the most fascinating thing to me, Chris, is that publicly stated in this statement from Hunter Yurachek, the AD, is Petrino has expressed his desire to be a candidate for the full-time job.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a line that's raised a lot of eyebrows in college football over the last like 20 minutes or so. Not surprised. I think we both knew that Bobby Petrino wanted to be Arkansas's head coach long term. This is something that when Bobby Petrino went back to Arkansas in the first place, people speculated about. Like, how long does Sam Pittman have, and can Bobby Petrino essentially maneuver his way into becoming the head coach of the Razorbacks? And now he has an 8-game, as you said, runway to make a statement. And I don't know, I was texting somebody earlier, like, just 5-3 get it done, given the way the fan base feels about him, given the way that, frankly, some of the boosters around Arkansas feel about Bobby Petrino. We'll get into candidates in a little bit, but I can
Yeah.
only really think of 1 or 2 people who would be slam dunk candidates ahead of Bobby Petrino in this discussion process. And if he gets the momentum, we see this every year in college football. If you get momentum, the players get behind you, you can become the head coach of a program pretty easily, especially when you have friends in the booster class. And Bobby Petrino, I mean, it's crazy to think about 14 years later, but he has at least a small opportunity to make this really work after he was fired for motorcycle game.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I'm an Arkansas guy. I live 5 minutes away from campus. I know a lot of people up there. That's why we've been able to be ahead of this story for most of the last 2 weeks. And it still was shocking to me less than 2 years ago when they hired him to be the OC. And that was pretty much as a result of him, like a feeler being reached out, like, would Bobby be interested in this? And then Bobby having some booster friends who are like, yes, he would. And in fact, encouraged him to do so. And it worked out last year. I think that they could have been a lot worse than they were last year. And I think Bobby actually propelled them into being able to be a bowl eligible team. But this year, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do you remember who Bobby Petrino got the job over that cycle at offensive coordinator?
I don't actually. Who was it?
Ben Arbuckle, who is now making waves at Oklahoma. So Arkansas took a pretty big swing on Bobby Petrino at that time. Like, there was a lot of faith put in him. And I mean, Ben Arbuckle at the time was a 28-year-old offensive coordinator for Washington State, but like, they put a lot of chips in with Bobby Petrino at this time, and we'll see if he can pay it off.
That would have been an amazing hire. You know, Pittman, I think for as much criticism as he's getting here the last 2 years, he made some really incredible coordinator hires in his time. He had Barry Odom as his defensive coordinator, who's now head coach at Purdue in his second breath of life as a head coach. You had Kendall Briles as the offensive coordinator that really got things firing there under KJ Jefferson, and even before that with Felipe Franks. And then they hired Bobby Petrino, as you mentioned, and then Travis Williams. Say what you will about the roster this year. Last year actually turned that defense around a little bit based off of the pieces they had. But what's really going to be fascinating here, Chris, is how Petrino works with the defensive coordinator Travis Williams right now. Petrino's very much obviously an offensive coach, and that shows up in practices. They do things to favor the offense. You know, there's no like bringing players to the ground, even in the preseason and things like that, protect the quarterback. Defenses probably don't get to get quite the amount of work they want in practices. And I can remember this back even when I was like 5th string beat writer covering Arkansas 15 years ago when Petrino was the head coach. And that probably hasn't changed that all that much. In fact, I know it hasn't. Another thing to consider here, it's soap opera, right? Considering all the Petrino history, do you know who was on the Atlanta Falcons team when Bobby Petrino exited overnight and just left a note on the lockers that he was leaving the Falcons for the Razorbacks as head coach?
I don't know. I was also like, I think 12 or something like that. So
Arkansas defensive coordinator Travis Williams.
Really?
He was a linebacker for the Falcons that year.
Wow.
So interesting dynamic there. Certainly at face value as we move forward here, but they need to work together if that defensive staff, in fact, does stay together under Bobby Petrino, because Petrino now has the power of the program to make some decisions. That defense has been, as I said, approaching historically bad issues there. There's low effort. I don't think those players are all gelling together very well. And that's the number one thing you got to fix. But also, Chris, their offense actually hasn't been all that hot the last 2 weeks. They have scored a total of 16 points offensively in the last 6 quarters. including in that loss where they melted down against Memphis 32-31. And then yesterday against Notre Dame 56-13. And Arkansas's offense was completely shut out in the second half.
Absolutely. Against the Notre Dame defense that had been cut up left and right, was without their best player, Leonard Moore, the cornerback All-American. That is the defense that was very vulnerable. And after the first quarter, essentially on Saturday, they couldn't get anything going. Sometimes momentum of a game can kind of take you out of it a little bit. So it's tough to blame everything on the offense there for some of its lack of success, but you certainly would like to see more. And if the offense had stepped up a little more in the Memphis game, like, we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation because Sam Pittman wouldn't be out. And I think John Talty mentioned this earlier on our show that wasn't an emergency. It's a pretty big what if. What happens if those 2 fumbles don't happen earlier in the year for Arkansas against Ole Miss and Memphis?
Yeah, you may have been looking at a 4-0 Arkansas team ranked in the maybe top 20 going into the game against Notre Dame. But that's why they play a full 60 minutes in football, right? You got to play all the way. So now we look to the future here for Arkansas. They'll have an interesting candidate pool. We've got 5 FBS jobs already open, man. We're not even out of the first month of the season. We knew coming in that this would be a historic.
Right? Sorry.
Is it 6?
Because it's Kent State, Stanford, Virginia Tech, UCLA. Yeah, sorry. I know. five Power 5 jobs. Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot about Kent State and where everything happened there in the preseason. So but 5 power programs. And we're expecting a historic cycle this year. And a lot of here in the early goings, especially, you're going to hear familiar names, especially because Oklahoma State and Arkansas are 3 hours apart. And you could argue they're probably on the same type of competitive level, right?
Very similar candidate pool, I would have.
Right, very similar. And I think Arkansas is very much probably, here in the early goings, offensive coaches are probably going to kind of pique their interest quite a bit. But, we'll see. Here early on, let's just start with this, number 1. How would you rank this Arkansas job among the jobs open right now?
First, but with the caveat that if you rank this first and you take this job, the path to a championship is obviously much more difficult. You have to have a really, really firm self-belief in your ability to scheme and your ability to evaluate in the portal for Arkansas to be a job you can win at big. I don't remember who mentioned in the comment section, I was looking earlier, but this is definitely not the same Arkansas job that it was in 2011. The SEC is much more difficult. So you have to take that into consideration. But when you consider the investment around the program, you consider the SEC revenue dollars, and you consider the fact that you're playing in the SEC and get to recruit to the SEC, I do think it's the best job of the ones open.
It's interesting. I was on CBS Sports HQ earlier, and I said that it might be the second best job open right now, but has the potential to be number 1. And the reason why I said second right now is because at the very least, Virginia Tech has made their plans clear that they're trying to improve things financially for the athletics department. In fact, in 2 days, they will go in front of their board of visitors to request additional funding for the athletics department on average of $50 million a year to help entice potentially some candidates out there. Virginia Tech's also in a situation where you play in the ACC where you could probably be more competitive and maybe win a title, whereas Arkansas, they've never won an SEC title, right, in football. And in fact, it's been a very long time since the Houston Nutt era, since they've been to the SEC championship game when the SEC was completely different, and Nick Saban wasn't out there just absolutely destroying everybody. But Arkansas has the potential to maybe be the number 1 job among the current openings because they've got a very rich booster circuit, right? Very rich. That's why the basketball program's in the position it's in now under Coach Cal. They're able to provide some funds there.
Shout out to Walmart, Brandon. Shout out to Walmart.
Yeah, shout out Walmart. Shout out John Tyson Chicken. But the issue, though, is that, boosters have been hesitant to really fully financially commit to the football program because of Sam Pittman. They never thought of him as a long-term answer, even after they won 9 games. The struggles early after that 9-win season were apparent, and it kind of scared people away. Now, if you got an athletics director or an athletics department that shows, hey, we are fully committed to football, we need to invest, here is our plan, I think that'll get those folks to pull out their pocketbooks and invest in the football program and could potentially make this one of the more coveted jobs that's currently open and maybe attract some really interesting names here in the early going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the potential of this job is higher than the potential of all the other jobs out there. Maybe outside of UCLA, but UCLA's problems within the athletic department and money and fundraising are so embedded in the program. I don't know if there's a quick fix there. For Arkansas, as you said, Brandon, like the fix is obvious. You got to rally the boosters and get people to open up their very large pocketbooks. And if that happens, like, I think it's a very attractive job.
We will get into candidates here for Arkansas and look ahead here as their coaching search revs up right after this break.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
Welcome back to College Football Insiders Emergency Podcast. Sam Pittman out at Arkansas, and now we're talking candidates here. Chris Hummer, I'll start with you. A very interesting pool of guys, including some guys with even some Arkansas ties that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, I actually wanted to ask you the first question, Brandon, because I think this is the name that's going to hang over this search. Rhett Lashlee, SMU's head coach, Arkansas native. He would definitely be my first call if I was Arkansas. Do you think Arkansas has a job that could entice somebody like Rhett Lashlee, who's in a very good situation at SMU? I'll put it that way.
This is my opinion. I think that he would be a home run hire. I believe he would probably show some interest because it would tug at his heartstrings. I know, but business usually supersedes that, especially these days, and the opportunity to win a championship, right? SMU has the financial backing. We've seen it. They went to the college football playoff their very first year in the ACC and finished ACC runner-up in the championship game. And they're better positioned, at least as far as maybe a higher ceiling at SMU based off of just what their financial commitment has been. But Rhett Lashlee grew up in Arkansas, just, like 20 minutes away from me. And, his dream at one point was to be the head coach of the Arkansas Razorbacks. You can go find probably old photos. I mean, I've seen them of him wearing Arkansas gear and meeting former Arkansas head coaches and just being enthralled by it. And, but people change, times change, and coaches want to win. They want to be in a position where they feel comfortable and they have an opportunity to win a championship. So that's all going to be considered. But as of right now, Rhett Lashlee is in a better position there. But Arkansas would be, in my opinion, would be smart to make that phone call. And also, when you do make that phone call, have a plan in place of how you can support him and show that we're serious about this and we can provide the financial backing. Otherwise, I think that would be a very hard sell, even with the heartstrings being tugged for Rhett Lashlee.
Agreed. If you had asked me this 3 years ago, like did I think Rhett Lashlee would leave SMU for Arkansas? I would have said yes in a heartbeat. But I think we've seen the investments SMU is given to football. I think we've literally seen their investment happen in real time when they essentially bought their way into the ACC. This is a program fully committed to winning in football. It is one of the wealthiest donor bases in America. Dallas is one of the easiest places to recruit to in America, one of the most fertile places in America in terms of recruiting. Even transfer bounce backs, it's an easy place to recruit to. So I'm not quite as sure anymore that Rhett Lashlee would entertain Arkansas. And I think you're right, Brandon. It's going to be up to Arkansas to prove itself to Rhett Lashlee that is a job worth considering, as opposed to the other way around, where I think 3 or 4 years ago it would have been a very easy sell. So that's what I'm curious about. And I'm going to ask you, Brandon, I hate to take the mic from you so often as the host, but I wanted to ask you about another name that I'm very curious about, because I know you're very close with Gus Malzahn. Gus Malzahn is a name, when I talk to agents, that they kind of bring up with this job. Like, Gus is obviously an Arkansas legend, like high school legend for a long time. They've been shifts passing the night at times in their careers. It's never worked. But this is a circumstance where Gus is having a bit of a renaissance at Florida State. Seems a little reinvigorated after I think the batteries were very low at the end of his UCF tenure. How do you think Gus Malzahn would factor into the search?
That's also an interesting dynamic because there's just so much background and storylines there. Remember, his first job in college out of high school as a head coach in high school was at Arkansas as an offensive coordinator. It was only for a year because there was just a bad meld there with the head coach, Houston Nutt. And then he went off to Tulsa and rebuilt his career, built his career up from there and ended up winning a national championship at Auburn as a coordinator and then became a head coach. I covered Auburn on a local beat there. To be frank with you in full transparency, I've become close with Gus Malzahn since then, since the Auburn days, and we talk. If you guys remember back in 2000, was it 17 or 19? I get my dates mixed up. I'm sorry, guys. Auburn went to the SEC championship game, and Arkansas's job was open. Arkansas was talking to Gus Malzahn about leaving Auburn to become the head coach there. And I believe that got closer than a lot of people think to happening. And I was shocked to hear about it. But it didn't work out for whatever reason. Every school also has their own booster kind of cliques. Some like the idea of a Gus Malzahn back then, some don't. It's just a matter of which week, which booster has control of things, right? It's like that at a lot of schools. I haven't quizzed Gus Malzahn on if he even wants to be a head coach again, because as you said, UCF, I think, really kind of burned him out because not only was he being a head coach, a CEO, a play caller, but he's also having to handle NIL. Their NIL collective was struggling a little bit, so he had to help with that. He was wearing a lot of hats. And I think he saw the writing on the wall there, and he wanted to put it in a better position with someone else. Now he's calling plays. He doesn't have to worry about being a head coach, and he loves it. I think that's why you've seen him be more creative, and they've been so successful, Florida State, with their offense. My question is even if Malzahn wants to be a head coach again, does he fall back into that UCF mindset where he feels like he has to do so many things and it ends up hurting him as potentially as a play caller? Does it show up like it did near the end of his career at Auburn as head coach, where some of the recruiting fell off, especially along the offensive line, and that really doomed them? Those are things you have to consider. And also, I just don't know if Gus wants to be a head coach again. I do know he wants to win a championship. That's what he wants to do before he walks into the sunset. But I'm being very long-winded here just because I know a lot of this stuff. But it's a heartstring thing there too. It really is. He's an Arkansas guy. And I think his dream at one point way back was to be the Razorbacks head coach, even though he was a walk-on at Arkansas at one point and was at the Liberty Bowl and they misspelled his last name on the back of his jersey. I've seen the jersey. I thought it was pretty funny, but
That's incredible.
He loves Arkansas. He came to my house this summer. We recorded some podcast episode that no one will probably ever see the light day of, except for some clips. And even on the podcast, he's like, "Man, we're Arkansas guys. We got to stick together and all this." It's it's just I don't know how to describe it. Like the coaching fraternity and people in Arkansas, it's just a little bit different. Like everybody seems to leave the state. They don't ever really stay. And then a lot of them hit big for whatever reason. Not just Malzahn and Lashlee, but Bear Bryant's from Arkansas. Did you know that? Jerry Jones, who owns the Cowboys, Arkansas guy. Jimmy Johnson, Arkansas guy. Pete Carroll used to work at Arkansas under Frank Broyles. There's just a lot of Arkansas ties. They just seem to never be able to get one of their own to come back and lead the race.
Yeah, the fact that Barry Switzer, Jimmy Johnson, and Jerry Jones are all at Arkansas at the same time is a crazy. Just
and listen, Jimmy Johnson will tell you too. He wanted the Arkansas job before they hired Lou Holtz, and he felt like he got kind of screwed there. He came over and the interview for the job and then left, and then found out immediately that it was just pretty much a courtesy interview, and that they were giving the job to Holtz. And he thought that Frank Broyles at the time, who told him a couple of years before, "I'd like you to be the head coach probably someday," burned him, and the rest is history. Ended up going to stayed at Oklahoma State, went to Miami, and won a national championship. But that seems to be Arkansas in a lot of ways. I don't know why. They seem to get in their own way. Who else would maybe be interested in this, or at least names we'll probably hear here in the early goings, Chris?
Yeah, so I'll just throw out some names that people in college, the kind of industry, have brought up to me as possibilities for this job. GJ Kinney, Texas State head coach. He's going to come up with a lot of these jobs this cycle. I said this is going to be a very similar candidate pool to Oklahoma State, and I think GJ Kinney will definitely be in the mix there as well. But he's a name that I think you certainly need to know in this search. Eric Morris at North Texas, another one of those offense first head coaches with heavy Texas ties that I think is going to get a lot of consideration for jobs, especially if they keep winning. Ryan Silverfield at Memphis is another. I mean, Arkansas fans are very familiar with him based on a couple of weeks ago, is another name you probably need to know.
Longest active winning streak in the FBS at 9 games right now.
Yep. And he knows how to balance NIL investment with development. They have a very healthy NIL kind of infrastructure at Memphis. He knows what it's like to fundraise on that side and also to win a lot of football games. Jeff Traylor at UTSA, former Arkansas assistant, I think is a name people certainly need to know. I feel like the hot names in college football kind of ebb and flow very quickly, right?
Yeah,
but we're not too far removed from Jeff Traylor winning back-to-back conference championships with UTSA, a program that had very little success before that. And he's a guy with Arkansas ties. He's an East Texas guy, which, depending on the part of East Texas, can basically be Arkansas anyway, as you know, Brandon.
That's right.
And Jeff Traylor gets along very well with a lot of people in that Arkansas space. And I think he is a guy that could certainly factor in the mix. I'd be curious for your perspective on two names, Brandon. So John Summerall, right? Like, he's a name that is going to come up for basically every open SEC job. There are others I think might tempt him more, but do you think Arkansas is the type of job that could tempt him to leave Tulane?
If they show a good financial commitment to NIL and everything, because he's in a great spot anyway at Tulane. And that's why partially he took the Tulane job after being at Troy's, because they've got one of the best NIL situations out of any group of 6 school with the booster clubs, whatever you call it. But again, that's the thing. Like, I'm not hearing like a clear plan from Arkansas. Like, here's how we're going to set this job up. And they're still working on that, I'm sure. But you're right. Summerall is probably going to get some really big play at some other schools. And there's a lot of jobs that are still going to open. I would think that his name would come up a lot at Florida when that job opens, right?
Absolutely. And Rhett Lashlee's as well, probably. To be
right.
honest. Which is an interesting part of this whole search. I think you'll hear Alex Golish's name come up as well in this search, and basically every search in the Southeast this cycle. But the name I really wanted to kind of run by you, Brandon, was another old friend for Arkansas. He is Barry Odom at Purdue, former Arkansas defensive coordinator. I wouldn't say he's probably going to be at the top of the list for Arkansas, but when you talk about having a lot of friends in the building, you point to a guy like Barry Odom, who is very close to a lot of boosters in Fayetteville. And I'd be curious how you think he stacks up as a candidate, even though he's in his first year at Purdue.
I'm kind of mixed on that. I will say my belief, my opinion is that he would take the job if offered. He does have a lot of connections here. In fact, I believe his son a year or two ago actually moved back here, even with them at UNLV in Vegas, so he could play football at a local high school here. I think that he would show interest in the job if Arkansas were to look at him. I think he gets the place. I think he gets the boosters. I think he gets the recruiting. He had a very successful time here, kind of resurrecting himself after what happened at Mizzou as head coach. And he's just a great play caller defensively. And at UNLV, I think he just hit it out of the park at UNLV. I mean, that place is, for so long, hadn't done really anything. And he took it over and immediately took it places, took it to back-to-back Mountain West championship games, and laid the foundation for what Dan Mullen's been able to do there early here. But I think he would get quite a push from the booster circuit there. I I wonder how he would line up once they get into more of like an interview process, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll throw one more name at you. And Brandon, I know this is a name you brought up in our kind of secret CBS work chat, but I think it's another old friend worth knowing is Barry Lenny at Illinois, their offensive coordinator.
Yeah, Barry, if you guys remember, he was actually the interim head coach at Arkansas when Sam Pittman, or excuse me, Brett Bielema was fired, and that ended. And there wasn't really interest in promoting him full-time to the head coaching job. But because of his success previously going through the Texas ranks there, and then now at Illinois, you see what he's capable of, obviously, as a play caller. And this is a guy who's, again, got Arkansas ties. Family's very heavily invested in the Razorbacks. Is from that part of the state too. I think he's someone that would be very, very much a candidate from the standpoint of maybe allowing him to interview and seeing where it goes from there. And also, I think a lot of it depends on how Illinois does the rest of the way here. I think in a lot of ways they got to prove offensively, and also just as a team that last year wasn't necessarily a fluke, that they can build on that and show that Illinois could be more consistent. And, I think Illinois, despite that loss to Indiana, coming back that very next week and bouncing USC is a great coaching job by that entire staff there. And I think Lunny is certainly a very viable candidate for Razorbacks.
Yeah, he does an outstanding job. And I think people in the industry think he is on the head coach track over the next year or two. I don't know if that's a P4 job or getting one of the G5 jobs in kind of the Sun Belt area, but he is a guy those in the industry have pointed to as a potential candidate. I have one last pitch for you, Brandon, and this is coming from my heart as a Cowboys fan. How about Jerry Jones as head coach? He gives up the Cowboys, goes back home, runs the Razorbacks for a couple of years and gets this ship righted. Like, does that sound good?
Who? The head coach for the Cowboys?
Oh, yeah. No, Jerry Jones, the head coach.
Oh, Jerry Jones himself. I was going to say,
yeah.
I don't think the head coach has.
No, Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys, gives up the team, goes to Arkansas, becomes the head coach. He can coach his first love, and I can have my NFL team bet.
I will say this. Jerry obviously is very still tied to Arkansas, has provided financial help for them. Not this past hiring cycle, but when they hired Chad Morris, Jerry Jones was a big Chad Morris guy.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
that obviously blew up in their face. I do wonder if the administration in Arkansas would be willing to get down on hands and knees and go, Jerry, we need all the help we can get money-wise. You've got a legacy, obviously, already with the Cowboys, but let's leave a legacy for the Razorbacks too. What can you do to help us here financially to help get some interest? And, what does that result in? I don't know. But, hey, Jerry and Deion Sanders are real close. Deion interviewed for the job here a while back before they hired Pittman. I know that. I'm just putting that out there just because, as you mentioned, the ties there with Jerry. He's a big Deion fan, obviously, big believer in him. That's why his name was coming up with the Cowboys opening. And, is there a desire to coach in the SEC, even if it's maybe at a place like Arkansas that hasn't won an SEC title? I don't know. What I'm saying here, my opinion is that there's a lot of possibilities out there, but it all depends on the plan for Arkansas, because they've not say they have unlimited resources, no such thing, but they've got resources that they got to tap into and see what that attracts.
No question. Deion would be electric if that did happen. I think he would be, if you give him an SEC infrastructure to recruit, even though he doesn't recruit in a traditional way, I think Deion Sanders would be very successful there.
I'm told he interviewed very well here, and he blew away Hunter Yurachek, the AD. That's what I was told a year or two ago. Yeah.
A lot more resources at Arkansas than there would be at Colorado. Two more names from the comment section I want to bring up. One of them I have a little bit of thoughts on. John Gruden, he's going to come up for SEC jobs, FBS jobs this cycle. We've talked about this on this show before. He is somebody that wants into college head coaching. Brandon, you wrote a great article on him last year. And then Mike Gundy, the former Oklahoma State head coach, talking to people around Mike Gundy this week. He definitely wants back in. I think Arkansas is a job that would be attractive to Mike Gundy. Whether or not he has enough shine left on him that he could garner interest for a job like that, I would question.
I'm
But
told
he's
he had
certainly-
interest in it a few years ago
Interesting.
when he was still at Oklahoma State. Yeah.
Yeah.
He had family here. Another tie. He would come here. In fact, I think I remember Gundy telling me, I think it was last year or a couple years ago, that he's been to like some games, not football, but other games here with family. I think one of his kids maybe went here, something like that. But he spent some time over here, and I was told a few years ago when the job opened that there was like just some like feeling out there from his base. And because, as you know, I mean, I thought he was going to go to Tennessee as well in the past.
I think he thought he was going to go to Tennessee in all fairness.
Right. But there was some interest on his behalf. I don't know how serious about Arkansas. I've heard that over the last year or two. But that, again, though, if Mike Gundy's interested, which I'm sure he probably is, because he wants to coach, and heck, he told us back at Big 12 Media Days, hey, if they want to fire me, that's fine. I'm going to go coach somewhere else. Is he going to change his approach with transfer portal, NIL, and is he willing to do that? Because if he's not willing to really change his ways, then it's not going to be worth it at any Power 5 program.
I think the sell on Mike Gundy, if you take him out of the kind of the nest that is Oklahoma State, is that he would be forced to adapt a little bit. And additionally, he would have an infrastructure around him from an NIL and fundraising perspective that is much stronger than what was in place at Oklahoma State. Part of that was on Mike Gundy for not contributing to the extent he probably should have. But Mike Gundy can be very charming, and Mike Gundy can be a heck of a fundraiser if he needs to be. And if you get a motivated Mike Gundy and a second chance, like, maybe that's a job that could work out. But I do think that's what's interesting about this job, Brandon. We've mentioned a variety of different candidates, retreads, sitting head coaches with success, rising offensive coordinators. There will be some defensive coordinators that come up too, I'm sure. Like, this is a job that attracts a really wide net of candidates. You can bring a lot of people into the program potentially. It just all depends on what vision Arkansas has for itself and how it wants to commit and build out an infrastructure around these potential candidates.
Right. Well, I think I'm going to cut this show off right there because I just got a phone call that I really should take from a source. So I think we did a pretty good job of breaking down the candidates, the potential here at Arkansas, those strengths, the weaknesses of the job, and the position and potentially where they might move forward with a very large candidate pool and certainly a lot of competition out there among schools already open and schools that probably are going to come open later down the road. And then you add in the mix, Bobby Petrino is the interim head coach, and also he's expressing interest in being the full-time head coach beyond this season. A lot to keep tabs on there at Arkansas, in addition to all the other coaching jobs that are open. And then now we're going into a week 6. We're about to hit the midway point of the year where you're going to see some more hot seats get warmer, maybe cool down a little bit, and potentially some more in-season changes at some very big jobs. For Chris Hummer, I'm Brandon Marcel. Thanks for joining us for this emergency episode of the College Football Insiders. Sam Pittman out at Arkansas. We will be back, barring any other breaking news or firings, here on the College Football Insiders Tuesday here on YouTube and wherever you find your podcast. We will see you down the road.